agenda. Agree. Susan? Any conflicts of interest? None noted. We have one item up on the agenda, and it's an update regarding student success initiatives, components of the secondary school review. We think at the secondary. It's quite a lengthy review, and I'd like to pass it over to Superintendent Poirier to introduce the guest speakers.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'll stand up because it's like the long room today. Similar to what we had last couple weeks ago at Committee of the Whole, we have a group of individuals with us today, Pete Burnett and Pat Brazo and Alex Harris, to give us an update specifically on the aspect around student success in secondary that relates to experiential learning. So including co-op, specialist high skills major, and then dual credits school college work initiative. In discussion about what would be presented today, and you'll note there was a number of slides included, we did want to be able to give that historical context and an understanding about guidelines that impact our decisions and our work, both in terms of how we decide what programs we run and how we're funded. So there's a lot of detailed information in there. I believe I said to Pete and Pat and Alex, you probably don't need to speak to every single slide because it's there if you want to go back and look at it. And we didn't want to have, something that was so drawn out in terms of all that content, but we thought it would be valuable for you to have it there as well. So that's why it's there. So I'll turn it over to the three of them and let them proceed with their presentation, and then we can have some questions afterwards. So thanks, Pete, Pat, and Alex for being here.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and thanks everybody for having us. It's always exciting to get a chance to come and talk about programs that we feel very energized by, and we know that students do as well. And that's the exciting part. In fact, I wore my my RCSB SHSM shirt. I wanted to brand myself today, so I was really proud. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to let Pat Brazo and Alex Harris show up all branded, and I'm not going to have mine on. And yet they came business professional, and I'm the only one here in a hoodie. So I apologize about that if I've offended, but I think you'll appreciate it as we kind of go through it. So really exciting. I know we don't have a lot of time, and Renal will say that I can get a bit wordy, so I'll try not to. As we work ourselves through this presentation, we're hoping that the alignment with our new strat plan, that the alignment with our framework for learning, which we all know is called Inspired Learning, we're hoping that they're obvious. And I want you to think about those documents and sort of use those as the lens as we progress our way through this, because they really do need to be the guiding thought process for this review. As we go through our secondary rethink, we want to try to come up with ideas about how we can inspire our students, right? And that framework for learning that we put together over a number of years, really, based on best practices, based on ways that we know engage kids, inspire community partnerships, all of those great things. That's going to be the lens that we go through this rethink in. And the experiential learning component for secondary programming really aligned itself well to both our Inspired Learning document and our strategic plan. So that's the framework. We're going to talk about the stakeholders a little bit. We're going to try to give you some context, some history about these special programs. Some of it you will have heard before. And you will have seen me parade around a little bit about experiential learning and how much that energizes kids and gives them those really authentic learning experiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, give that history, talk about the alignment, and then think a little bit more about what we can continue doing to keep pushing that forward, because we feel it's that powerful for kids. Okay, so let's go ahead then. And I wanted just to give a very quick overview about experiential learning. This is not new. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been talking a little bit about it, but if we could focus on like these bolded parts right here, remembering that the experiential learning cycle is really about giving kids an opportunity to participate in something real, something authentic, something that enables them to make connections for their learning. So that's the what part of the experience. And then the important part next then is the reflecting on that experience. So they take some time to think about what they just experienced. And we've got some programs that we're going to highlight that give them lots of opportunities to do that. So that's the so what. You reflect that. You experienced it. So now what? The application part is their move forward. How do they apply what they've just learned, what they've just experienced, what they now know about themselves moving forward to some future aspect of their life? It makes learning real. Go ahead, Scott, please, if you don't mind. So I want to talk a little bit about co-op. Many years ago, I was a co-op teacher and I loved it. I loved it for lots of reasons. It gave me an opportunity to get out in the community, to work with people who also cared about the success for our students. Right now, the co-op has sort of been redesigned by the curriculum. The curriculum's been redesigned. There's really a couple opportunities now. So the first one is what we used to always know co-op to be. Kids would take part in learning in classes, and then we would link those classes to their co-op experience. So they'd go out into the workplace. We'd link their learning in their workplace to a course like transportation technology. In many cases, it was to English, and we'd have kids think about how do you communicate, for example, in this workplace, right? We don't want you to think about communication only in the context of school, but how do you communicate clearly in the context of this workplace? And so that's what we used to always do. And then a couple of years ago, 2018, around that, the curriculum document for co-op was kind of revamped a little bit. And they gave us an opportunity to have another tie-in called DCO, or Creating Opportunities Through Co-op. And so we can actually have kids take co-op now concurrently while they do this. And that DCO course can be a 1 credit or a 2 credit course. We just have to decide up front when we're putting them in that. I won't get into the curriculum expectations for those. The important part here then, before I get Pat to move on, is just that last note. We can have kids take as many co-op credits as they want, but only a certain number of them, 2, I think, can count as compulsory credits towards graduation. But the others can be electives. Okay. Co-op, classroom component, community component. So in the classroom, we've got to get kids ready for their placement. We've got to work through the health and safety expectations. We've got to make sure they know what they're about to embark on in terms of that community placement. And we use a pre-placement component of the course to do that. Usually it's a couple weeks, but the new curriculum says it doesn't have to be. It's really about student readiness. And so we want to use that classroom component to get them ready for their placement. We also want to use that classroom component maybe to integrate some of their thinking. Some of that further reflection can happen in a classroom component. And then there's the community component, and that's when they're out having fun. They're out learning. They're out on the job training. They're working with employers. They're working with colleagues. They're hopefully realizing how what they learned in that transportation class is actually happening in the real world. And that's the exciting part. That's the part that we think really aligns to the work that we want our kids doing moving forward, right? It gives them that pathway too. And that's the other really cool thing about co-op. There's a pathway for everybody, right? And we're encouraging students. You don't have, if you're on a pathway to university, you can still take co-op. If you're on a pathway to an apprenticeship, you can take co-op. And I would say, I'd like to see you should take co-op in any pathway. Let's keep going, Pat. So the essential process for co-op, this is just pulled from the curriculum document. So I think I can move quickly through it, but you'll notice the key points there: integrating, monitoring, and assessing and evaluating students, the health and safety part as well. So we just want to make sure that kids are ready for their placement, and that as they go through it, we're giving them an opportunity to learn and reflect. And we're going to monitor that, have conversations with them about that, and hopefully help develop that even further. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to change places with Pat here. We're going to go on to another special program, our SHSM program.
Okay, so again, thank you for having me here. He took a couple minutes off my time, so that's all right. I'll
Go fast.
So specialist high skills major, or SHSM as we call it here, or SHSM in the rest of the province. I prefer SHSM. I don't know. I get laughed at a lot in provincial meetings, but I don't care. I love it. So a little bit of background on where this program comes from. It shortly got created after the Student Success Initiative that Jenny presented to you guys last time. In 2006, with 600 students total in the province. Now, why they created this program is they saw that 33% or so students went on to university, where the 67% didn't really have a program or something to keep them engaged in their secondary schools. Okay, so they came up with this, and their goal somewhere in here somewhere is they want to show the importance of their OSSD in the real world. Okay, so it's revolves around what Peter just said about the experiential learning, right? The hands-on learning, the hands-on experiences to make better career decisions. Okay, so I guess my time's up. Now, a couple of things that's really important here is like this program has proven that students that are enrolled have a better likelihood of completing their OSSD. Okay, and I have the statistics on my phone if you guys want to know that later. But it's a great program for that. Okay, and it's built in for the schools. We have to research labor markets. We have to research if the program actually fits in that community. Okay, and that's actually the next slide. So I kind of should have flipped those. So something you may not know is the actual process of how we get new programs in our schools. Okay, how do we get a sector in Opiongo, for example? Okay, the process is long. We can't just say, oh, we would like this one, and then they give it to us. There's a lot of thought, there's a lot of research that's done to make sure that the program actually survives and gives the students and the community what they actually need, right? So first thing is we need a team. Central team needs to be involved, administration, student success. We need the CERT teachers, the co-op teachers need to be involved. Everybody needs to be on board before we even have the application process start. We must have, again, I'm going to skip through a lot because you guys have all this here, but I'll go through the important parts. We must prove that we can offer the courses required to complete the program in all the pathways. Okay, so that's something we have to make sure that these are attainable for the students. We also have to do a labor market analysis. Okay, what's the growing, what's the growing job, like what's needed in the community? And to prove that it's related to the sector that we are actually applying for. That's part of that as well. We need to have our partnerships in place. So we need to find our community experts who are willing to take on co-op students, who are willing to come into our classes, talk to our students, who are willing to take trips, teach our kids certifications, training, stuff like that. And we must have some post-secondary institutions on board as well for the reach ahead, the pathways. So now, after we've done all this, we've got our programs. Then we get our funding. So the funding is the money that we get to use to bring our students out and try these excellent adventures and learn these skills hands-on. Okay, so just a little bit of information. This year, our estimated is about just under 600,000. And what I like is last year, the ministry decided to pump a whole bunch of money into the skilled trades. They've noticed that there will be a shortfall in those in that labor market. Okay, so they pumped a whole bunch of money. We went through the application process and we got an additional $300,000 for the board. 15 sections is that what we pushed out into our schools, into our secondary schools in the tech and co-op sections. Okay, 15,000 of it is going to be for an innovation program that we're going to do. It's going to be more of an awareness to teachers. To SHSM is amazing. So that's what this is what SHSM brings to our board. Okay. Now, the categories, you guys can read that later, but just wanted to go through that. Next slide, please. Now, for a student to be able to complete the programs, they have to do 5 components. The courses, which that's what they do in high school, they take credits, but 2 of them have to be cooperative education. So experiential learning on top of experiential learning. So they have to take the courses and we have to bring them out and do all these certifications and training. Okay, these have to be sector relevant. So hoist training for transportation, for example, you wouldn't teach hoist training in the health and wellness sector. So they're very relevant to what they're doing. And then the other 3, the experiential learning, career exploration. What can I do in that sector? The reach ahead. How do I get there? This is when our partnerships with the post-secondary educations come in, and or professionals that help in apprenticeships and stuff like that. And then this, my favorite one here, is the sector partner experience, where they team up with somebody in the industry and learn how math, coding, or even they do an ice challenge with them that's relevant to the sector. Okay, so a little snapshot of our program now. This is what we have at our CDSB. So we have 37 programs and there's 7 high schools. So every high school has some programs. There's 19 possible sectors that the ministry offers. We cover 13 of them. We offer 13 of the 19, which I think is pretty amazing. They are offered in all pathways, which is very important. And this is, I just kind of threw that in there because I found that a little interesting when I was looking through the historical data of all programs since the beginning here at our CDSB. I found it interesting. So like 46% of our students that joined the program were university bound. And then college and apprenticeship workplace were the rest of them. So it kind of made me realize, well, that's what the program was designed for, right? Is to get everybody in every pathway to have that hands-on real life experience. And I think that was pretty interesting. Okay.
So I'll be brief. Real quick. I mean, yeah, you're laughing, right? Because you're like, I'm not gonna be brief. I'm gonna try my best. I'm not gonna say much except that basically OYAP is this little interesting kind of nugget that doesn't fit with whatever you expect it to be. It's funded by a whole different ministry. The Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development funds OYAP. The money doesn't come from Ministry of Ed. It doesn't follow normal rules. You're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. So the apprenticeship system in Ontario is needlessly complex. Students know for sure they can apply to university, they can apply to college, but how do I get to be a plumber? How do I get to be an automotive service technician? It's not as straightforward. OYAP program is there to introduce students through co-op to experiences in the skilled trades. There's over 140 skilled trades in Ontario. So the Ministry of Labor and Skills Development, which has changed its name a few times in the last couple of years, sends some money over to school boards to a person like myself, who is tasked with making sure that students are aware of opportunities in the trade. Everything goes through co-op in this case. If you don't mind advancing, that'd be great. A student goes out on placement. Whether they're interested for sure in being a tradesperson or not, they are enrolled in the program. Funding is there to provide them with safety gear, boots, training like Pat mentioned, perhaps for forklift or working at heights, whatever it might be. The main idea that we want to do is to have students explore the skilled trades as a first choice pathway. Difficult in the school setting. Educators, mostly university educated, sometimes college educated, sometimes trades or workforce educated. We don't always have the best tools to explain to students what skilled trades are. So that's the main idea, and certainly it ties in with what the government is saying right now. There is a shortage of skilled tradespersons. So school to work transition, school to work pipeline, whatever you want to call it, OYAP, a poor acronym perhaps, but maybe better than SHSM, is there for students. Please go ahead, you're fine. So basically, like I mentioned already, this is my favorite part right now. Learning, well-being, lifestyle, all kind of rolled into one. And where do they get that experience? Obviously in the workforce. It comes through co-op. Kids don't know what they like or what they don't like until they try. So our job in OEAP is to provide opportunities, like it says in the second bullet, to explore apprenticeship, explore skilled trades. Will they go right into it after high school? Some might. Will they have 3 or 4 career changes? Some might. We want to give them exposure. Please go ahead if you don't mind that. So it's pretty interesting. We get money, like I said, from the Ministry of Labor, Training, Skills Development, and we certainly get envelopes of money for certain students who identify with certain groups, be it young women, students who are Indigenous, marginalized, racialized, from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And tonight we actually have an event going on online. About 6 o'clock tonight, you probably saw an invitation for a virtual career expo geared towards young women and their families. So open to everybody. Thanks, Pat, if you don't mind going ahead. So we work a lot with the labor market. We got to know what's going on. We work with employers. Very lucky to spend numerous days out in the community, visiting employers, marketing the board, matching up students with potential placement opportunities and potential careers. They can get signed as a registered apprentice. Remember, needlessly complex? They can get signed as a registered apprentice while they are still young and accumulate hours towards becoming a journey person or a registered tradesperson in that trade. We sign legal documents with students and employers and their parents if they're under 18, getting them to be registered apprentices. So strapland, community partnerships, 100%. That is what we do. So we're out there in the community. We have to make sure we report on the funding, and it specifically says that you must create these partnerships. So whether it's very informal, a quick chat, whether we're sitting down, whether we invite them in for a, well, pre-COVID, invite them in for a sit down and a talk, we're working with employers. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, needlessly complex. So kids don't know what they don't know, right? We keep a record. We have a database where student information is entered, and you can ask Superintendent Poirier. You basically have to sign your life away to get into this database. If a student changes their mind a few years down the road, oh yeah, I did that in high school, and then I didn't want to come back. Those hours are recorded, so they can actually get credit for things they've done in the past. And so goals basically, you know, enjoy OEAP, go become a participant, maybe become a registered apprentice, maybe just end up with a diploma and a good work experience and a good sense of what's out there in the community. It depends. Student-centered. Does the student know for sure they want to go into the trades? Maybe. Maybe they're just going to have an experience that they can reflect on, to Pete's point earlier, and come back to or circle back to in their life. Yeah, so we get money, right? Money is good. We get money. Pays for me to be here in front of you folks and to go out and do all this great work. Also pays for student support, training, pays for their gear, if they need safety gear to work where they are. So it removes some barriers for students. And I will tell you one thing that is reported often in the local labor market, planning guides around here. Our employers, this is advantageous to us, count on our students to fill labor gaps. Great example. Today, about an hour ago, I was in a co-op office, a co-op teacher came in, you know, paperwork goes to OEAP, they passed me, I enter it. I said, how's Austin doing? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say student name in here, but it's a student from here in Austin. Oh yeah, great, co-op. He's in this special program we have. We've been able to secure some funding for his employer to take that student on. They offered the student a job if they weren't sure what they wanted to do after high school. So this student, they said, come to us, come with us for a year, come for 2, come for 6 months. The student has made such a good impression. They've offered that student a job right out of high school, if that student wants. Oh yeah, boring stuff. Paperwork, right? In spring, I got to do paperwork. We send in a business plan. They approve it. They send the money. We spend the money. You don't mind, Pat? One more? Oh, some stats. So, well, we try to beat the province. Basically, we try to beat the provincial average in the number of students that are enrolled. So this is as a slice of the pie. Next one, if you don't mind. We try to beat the province, you know, with the number of students that complete the program. One more, if you don't mind. And we try our best to beat the province in some of the metrics they study, and one of them being the percentage of females registered in the program in the trades. Next one. Oh, we can talk about dual credit too. I love dual credit. This is a great program. You've heard me talk about it before. Students can get a college credit while they're still in high school. So they will earn a college credit and a high school credit in 42 hours. Normal course is obviously 110 hours, but with dual credit in 42, they get college credit and a high school credit equivalent code on their transcript. And this is again for students who, success is in reach, but they might be disengaged. So it's a chance to show them that they can be successful at college, earn that credit, and then that can count towards their program or as an elective if they go to any college in Ontario. I think I just mentioned that. And again, everything kind of dovetails together, right? SHSM, OEF, dual credit. Another example, I'll show you if you don't mind. Yeah, we'll skip that. We'll go to the good one here. Yeah, keep going. We'll just skip all this. They have all this stuff. So we do different models of dual credit. Before the pandemic, students can go ahead to the college. Or college professors can come to this building or any other high school in the county and deliver a credit there. We've done both. And there's more with apprenticeship training. Keep going. I'm going to show you a story. We had kids do this last year. It was great. We did some carpentry level 1 with the college. We're going to do it again. I know we're running out of time. So Pat, if you want to go ahead, just keep going, Pat.
You want me to find the one with the picture of the?
Well, actually go back to this one. So you're going to see some logos down here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We're chasing. We have college partners, right? So Algonquin College is a close partner. If you want to go back one, we're trying to get a program in place at a certain high school around here where students can earn a level 1 apprenticeship exemption for doing their normal courses. So we're doing whatever we can to give students a leg up. I mean, I can't really say it any more clearly than that. Can you give me one more here, Pat, to the picture? That means we're just blowing out. We're doing really well. If you go back one really quick, we're doing really well. We got a lot of kids in dual credit, and you can look at that later. Next one, Pat, if you don't mind. So this student right here, this is an RCDSB student participating on an OEF panel for young women. So just to show you how this aligned, and then I'm going to get off the stage here. So this young lady is a student in one of our schools in grade 11 and thought she had an interest in the trades. So she went out on a co-op placement. Her employer said, "You're a rock star. We would really like to sign you as a registered apprentice." So we did the paperwork. The student now is in OYAP and is a registered apprentice. Same as anybody who starts, whether they're 40, 50, 20, we do the same steps. So that student is there now. Is she in specialist high skills major? Yes, she is. She's in a transportation specialist high skills major. She's now in OYAP. Well, guess what? This March, this student is attending Algonquin College in Ottawa. Paid. Will do her level 1 training as an automotive service technician. Dual credit, OYAP, co-op, SHSM, experiential learning. What a great start. Probably own her own house by the time she's 23. So you can take one of these things, right? You can take them all. That's just an example of how they all go together. I don't think I have any more. Hey, Pat, are we done?
Oh, we're back to Pete now.
Okay, up to you.
That's me. There. Alex and Pat, they throw up slides about boring paperwork and reports and all this stuff, and somehow it sounds exciting when they talk about it. So I don't know how they do it, but it's amazing, and I'm lucky to work with both of them because they care about their program and they care about the kids that are in the programs, and they're constantly looking for ways to get more and more people involved in it. And that speaks to the professionalism of the employees in our board and how lucky I think our students are to have people like that leading program. So wonderful, and thanks very much for doing this, guys. We'll go quickly through these next couple of slides. We talked a little bit at the start about how I wanted you to think about the strategic plan and inspired learning as kind of a lens to go through when we think about our move forward with our secondary review. And I think you'll agree we're heading in the right direction already. We've been doing great things, and we've got lots of examples, and you see the excitement, hear the excitement in people like Alex when he talks about it. The strategic priorities that we've all agreed on need to be a focus for Renfrew County, inspired community engagement and partnerships. We've got it. In co-op, in OYAP, in SHSM, they could be long-term partners for us for brief periods of time. We talk about certifications, or even in classrooms outside of these programs, we bring in partners. We do that. Empower equity and well-being. We've all heard Gene Clinton talk about how students, when they're involved in deep learning, when they're involved in authentic learning, that supports their well-being. This experiential learning and these specialized programs do exactly that. We engage kids and they feel empowered in that, and that supports their well-being. We also, from an equity standpoint, try to open the doors for all students. And we make sure that every pathway is there. We try to make sure that every kid has an opportunity, regardless of their personal story, to take part in experiential learning opportunities. Achieve excellence in teaching and learning. You get it. We've talked about it. Let's move on for the sake of time. Inspired learning. So we're going to talk about the 4 elements of design. We're going to talk about the importance of developing core skills in literacy and numeracy. We're going to talk about the global competencies. They're all there. They're all in bed. I won't read every point to you, but trust me, if you haven't seen it already, our experiential learning programs at the secondary level hit every single aspect of our inspired learning framework, and that's very powerful. Let's move on to the next one. Learning partnerships, use of technology, and even in school shutdowns, even in remote learning, we found ways to connect with partners, and that was the power of technology, and we got very good at it. So good at it that we've still landed in this hybrid model where we have some employers who are saying to us, love to get together, can't today, can we connect online for a little bit? And we do it that way. We've gotten good. We're using technology to maintain some of those partnerships, and it's fantastic. The virtual learning environments or the variety of learning environments. We've got kids out and about. They're doing things in really cool ways, and they're taking that learning with them. Assessment and evaluation is a big part of our inspired learning framework as well, and in particular, the triangulated piece. And we try to make opportunities to have discussions with kids, to have observations, and you'll have conversations with co-op teachers, and they'll tell you, we're out doing a monitoring visit, and I just want to see the kids in action. I want to see their learning, and they take some time to type up their notes on that, but that really helps kids, and they can have conversations with kids. What are you learning? And they can help them with that reflection piece, because sometimes that's not so intuitive, but we model that. We have those conversations, and it's really important. We've talked about well-being, equity, and inclusion already, and it's a critical part of our framework as well. Do you have any more?
Yeah. Last one, or no, we skipped, yeah, oh, that's last one.
So really, again, we're talking about growth for kids in all this. And really, we're part of this secondary rethink because we want to make sure that we're always trying to do what's best for developing kids. And so if we think about kids' well-being, if we think about students' growth, academically, socially, et cetera, we believe that experiential learning through all these special programs and others are really a way to do it. And so we feel very empowered by doing that. We want to keep going through this process, the secondary rethink, and we're not going to leave any stones unturned if we can. There's an important amount of stakeholders that we'll have to consult. That'll be part of the process. But we're fortunate because the Renfrew County District School Board name is strong in our communities. And we want to keep it that way and help our community partners be part of that process. So I think that's really all I want to talk about there. So Pray, is there anything you want to add or should we?
No, I think that's good. It was about providing that background, knowing that we're going to be going out and getting some more voice, and there is a vision around some of the opportunities. Alex shared a little hint of one, some other pieces that we're considering around equity in particular, and maybe some other opportunities, but we do want to hear a voice from the schools and community as well before we finalize those next steps. So just over to questions if anybody has any for the group.
Yeah, it's more of a comment that I just found that in the last 10 years, increasingly students are sort of, as they graduate from high school, it's like they've already gone through sort of first base. They're already pumped about somewhat of a direction they're going in. I guess earlier on in my career, sometimes they graduate and there was a stagnant time where, I'm going to take a year or two, sort of find myself. I'm not sure what I want to do. And that sort of could be sometimes a good thing, but often they'll sort of get themselves into a rut. And I find that because of this and your presentation, I think there are fewer kids that fall into that sort of rut. They're already sort of out of the starting gate. I started to see that in the last, 5 years of my career. It's sort of like, hit the ground running, ready to go, whatever avenue. And this often kickstarts that. So those are my comments. And thanks for you three guys presenting. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that comment. The so what, the now what piece, I think you're absolutely bang on. And we hope that's the goal. So thank you for that feedback. Yes. Yeah.
I'd just like to commend, I love these programs. I currently am participating in the cooperative education program and Shazam or Schism or however we call it. I hear that across the province as well. People think we're crazy for calling it that. I just have one kind of concern that I see in my own school about the cooperative education program. I don't know if this is across the board or not, but a lot of students decide to stay in the classroom setting because that's where they're comfortable instead of exploring and going out into the community and taking, for me, I'm in a dentist office. It's something that I was not comfortable with, but I wanted to experience that. So I went out and did it. But, I had to do it of my own accord. And so, not all students will do that for themselves. So how can we encourage students to go out and explore their options instead of staying in that environment that they're comfortable in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's a really valid point. And cooperative education was designed and the curriculum was created to try to give students that experience outside of the classroom. So your point is well made. And I think that it starts well before a student gets in their grade 11 cooperative education year or their grade 12 cooperative education year. And so we're talking about, as part of our review, conversations made with career studies teachers, conversations with tech teachers. And I think it's through those kinds of conversations and the more opportunities we give kids to learn about potential careers, interest areas, the more likelihood in those pre-placement conversations, they're going to be able to be very specific about what kind of experiences they want. You make a good point though about helping kids kind of push past that little bit of an uncomfortable zone, right? And we're working on that. But I agree with you. The really authentic learning comes when they're outside of, unless they want to be teachers or education workers in some way, right? But even then, out of our buildings is sometimes a better approach. Thank you. I really appreciate your point.
Just checking, see if there's questions on the chat here.
Oh, good idea.
Here, Marjorie is a hand.
Oh, sorry.
Not a question, it's a comment. I want to comment on how far this board has come and education in Ontario in general. I have 3 children. One of them, they were all academic bound, and I think you called them advanced courses in those days, bad old days. And the one the girl decided that she was going to do auto shop. And she took 2 courses in auto shop. She stuck with it, but she was, may I say, harassed and made fun of by not only her peers, but the other kids who were all male in the auto shop and who were all of a certain collection of students, and she wasn't. And so she took a lot of harassment. Now I have a grandchild of one of those children, and he's taking similarly, he loves his tech courses, and he's also an academic sort of thing. But he gets no harassment, and there are several others who are also doing the highly academic courses with him. They are also doing these, shop courses, trades courses, as I should call them. And that's such a shift in attitude, both on the part of students, their parents, and their peers, and society in general, that it's okay if you may be university intended bound, but it's just fine to take some tech courses. And, I hope that this will all continue. I mean, it's just a tremendous thing, particularly your figures there on females getting involved in the programs, because my daughter could never have imagined that.
No, we have some, I really appreciate that. We have some strong advocates, for promoting the skilled trades for all students, and there are tech courses as well. So I think it's, our board is lucky. We've got some really strong voices who are very influential, and we're trying to sort of help everybody understand that skilled trades, for example, isn't a fallback option. It's a very legitimate option. We had a meeting yesterday actually with another company, and we were talking about a potential program where kids would kind of go through the model of starting a company through the lens of skilled trades. And, the more we think about these innovative approaches to helping things, the more we might reach kids who might say, I want to, but I don't fit the profile. We're trying to really expand what that profile looks like. Really
Great job on that.
well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We've got great, passionate educators leading the way. Thank you for that.
Just a comment and a question. I guess I just need to congratulate the three of you on your excitement and enthusiasm for the program, because we can't help but love it, right? Because you're bringing us all this wonderful information, and you're obviously great advocates for what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Question for you. I just wondered, I know the community component is so vital in all of those programs. Has it been more challenging to get those community businesses involved over the past couple of years, or how is that going? It has to be, I'm sure there are ups and downs around that, and I did wonder whether the pandemic caused more issues or not. I'm not sure.
So we've had issues in the health and wellness sectors, obviously, because we're not allowed to send students there. They don't have time to sit on a virtual screen and stuff like that. So yes, we've had some concerns there. We're trying our best. We're finding alternate ways of getting them co-op placements or linking them up for an SHSM certification or something like that. But a lot of them, I'll be honest, a lot of them have been very flexible and very open to the idea of the virtual world. And I was very shocked when that happened, where you have a transportation shop, like an auto shop, that's willing to come into a classroom virtually to get them a walkthrough of their work environment and explain to them what they do and give them a little bit of a background of their journey of how they became licensed mechanics, stuff like that. So there's been some challenges, which we're still kind of hopefully getting over that hump with the pandemics, relaxing their protocols and stuff like that. But I was pleasantly surprised at how open people were.
Yeah. Alex, do you want to add to that?
Ebb and flow, normal labor market cycles. Right now, it's a labor seekers market. So in terms of co-op placements, the bigger barriers are more for this school, for example, transportation. So that's still a bigger barrier. Employer interest is there. We have several conversations with employers regarding, I don't want to say a pipeline, but kind of like, how can we prepare students to enter this industry or this specific larger employer. So I would say overall, there's been pivoting to bringing online speakers in, as Pat mentioned, but a labor seekers market, and that really benefits our students at this point. Will that change in 12 years? We don't know, but right now our students are not having difficulty finding co-op placements, as sometimes there are employers fighting over the best students. Yeah. Now, if a student comes with, I want to work in rock climbing, whatever, gym, we don't have one, then, we're stuck. We try to find something else.
Great. That's excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? Leo?
Just more a comment again, like the three programs are amazing. When I would do the school visits, just going into Shazam's classroom, You know, it was phenomenal just to see the engagement and the infrastructure that we have in place for them to do that. You know, like even the automotive, it's like you're going into a full-fledged garage, more or less, right? And then with the ORIAP, you know, even with the day at the PNC, you know, and just when you walk through there and you see the skills, you know, that some of these people have, right? You know, it's just amazing. And then with the co-op, so we were just talking through our daycare with the co-op teacher last week about having a student doing a co-op there. So, you know, he was very, very thorough and, you know, had his little list of stuff to do. So it's, you know, a very good, important aspect of schooling, you know, one for either to find out that you really like this or find out that you don't like this. I didn't spend, you know, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever, like, you know, postgraduate stuff, before you get, you know, into something that you really like to do. So it's very encouraging.
Just as valuable, right? To realize I don't want to go down. Thought I did, but maybe not. So yeah.
I've talked to, you know, all kinds of people that said, I did a co-op, I didn't like it. So, you know, I'm not going down that path, and then saved them all kinds of grief and headaches, right?
Yeah.
So it's very valuable for all kinds of reasons.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt Program Achieving Committee's agenda item. Is there a seconder? Susan Humphries. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Program Achieving Committee is now officially adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Sorry.
Amy, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next committee, equity and inclusion, and we'll turn it over to Chair Adam.
Thank you, Chair. And okay, so call to order this meeting of the Equity and Inclusion Committee on November 9th, 2021. Are they, everybody seen the agenda? Are there any amendments, please? No, thank you. I'd like a motion to approve the agenda, please. Thank you, Brian. Leo. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest today on the agenda items? No, thank you. That's excellent. So now we can move on, and we do have 2 items on our agenda, but they are both being presented by our system principal for equity and inclusion, diversity, that's Amy Johnson, who has come again to explain some of these things to us. And I'd like to ask Amy now, Ronald, I'm sorry, you should introduce Amy a little.
Thanks, Marjorie. I'm just going to say a few words before I turn over to Amy. So just a reminder that in Ontario, school districts have the responsibility and the mandate to develop and to maintain an educational system that strives to provide equitable outcome for all students. And in doing so, it must ensure that it provides an education experience that is free of discrimination and bias. I think it's important to remember that we have that mandate as a school district. And we've been on this journey for a while now in Ontario, and Amy has provided some background, but more recently in 2017, there was a policy document that outlined 4 specific areas the school district needed to focus on, which are classroom and school practice, data collection, reporting and integration, leadership governance, human resources, and organizational culture change. And when we started this work last year with Amy, we were very clear that we were going to align the work with those 4 areas of implementation. And
It is very fluid. As you know, this work is changing very rapidly as people become more attuned to the lived experience of our students and of members of the community. So it's very important to keep in mind that we will annually come up with an action plan, and that may change based on the context. And the last comment I will make is you will notice a little bit of Indigenous content in the Equity Action Plan. Eventually, it is certainly my hope that we, as in alignment with the strategic plan, where we have equity and we have Indigenous, their own in that chart or that pie chart at the end, near the end of the strat plan. While the work is similar, they really are different. Indigenous work is anchored in treaty rights, in ancestral rights. They are not an equity seeking group, even though sometimes the work appears to be running in parallel. So I just wanted to provide that commentary, because you'll notice a little bit in the plan, but as we continue this work, I'm very confident that the other work in the equity portfolio will keep Amy and the work that she does very, very busy, and so will the work in the Indigenous focus. So Amy, over to you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me. I feel like Pete's gone here now, Pete, Alex, and Pat, but it's like they are talking about how much history we have in that area and how far we've come as a board. And I feel a little bit like this is just, the infant equity action plan. It's the first equity action plan in our board, but I am excited to be here and speak to you about it. Okay, so we can go ahead. I added a slide. If you guys got the slideshow, I added a slide, and it kind of speaks to what Ronald just mentioned. In the introduction of the report, I think that you folks already have, I talk about how I really do believe that the work is embedded in and evidenced in our new strat plan for sure, all of the three main strategic priorities for sure, as well as the inspired learning document. However, I feel on an even broader scale that those two documents are embedded under the big umbrella of human rights. And as Ronald referenced, Indigenous rights, which are different, treaty rights and ancestral rights, but also the human right that we all have in the service of schools to come to school free from discrimination of any kind. So I feel that the work in this portfolio that we're doing across the district really falls under the umbrella of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as well as the Ontario Human Rights Code. And also, as Ronald referenced, the Ministry of Education Equity Secretariat that is relatively new is another part of that umbrella. And it's the one that drives those 4 areas that Ronald mentioned. Okay. So we're going to start with school and classroom practices, and I'm not going to speak to all of the bullets up there, but I am going to bring a little bit of show and tell to show you. So I'm not going to go in order either, so sorry if you like that. But I'm actually going to start with the increase of inclusivity of the 2S LGBTQI+ student, staff, and parent community across our district. And that's a pretty broad effort that we're focusing on right now. And you'll start to see on these 4 slides in these 4 areas how each of them will dovetail into doing that. So this is a school and classroom practice. You'll see a little bit later, it's also going to come up in terms of policy review and creation. But in terms of show and tell, I thought I'd bring just a few concrete things to show you. So bathrooms are one way that we are inclusive to the 2S LGBTQ community. And so I'm just showing you some very basic signage now that we are using across the district that are gender neutral bathroom signs. All right. You will see that on the gender neutral bathroom sign, there is a toilet because that indicates what the room is for. It doesn't indicate a girl in a dress or a boy in pants. It is more inclusive to the range of gender spectrum that we now have in our school district. Okay. In addition, we've created both in English and in French some very basic, sometimes small things are big things, but safe space signage that we're starting to distribute across the district, both in English and in French. And you may notice the flag being called the Progressive Pride flag across the province, which has an addition to the original Pride flag that we saw across our society, which indicates Indigenous, Black, and other people of color. And the Indigenous umbrella term is two-spiritedness, as well as the pink, blue, and white colors on the flag, which indicate the transgender population. Okay, so these are some small things, but they are some big things in terms of how we are visibly including the 2S LGBTQ community across our district. Students, staff, and parents. Okay. And again, I'll speak to this a little bit later on some of the other slides because it does come into play in terms of some of the other areas that the ministry is asking us to work on. The next one I'm going to speak to, actually they kind of go together, is a guide that we're going to create to support K-12 text selection, as well as a secondary English course literature review. So basically what those two bullets speak to is, again, in line with what Ronald sort of introed with or began with, our obligation as a school district to be inclusive organization and inclusive schools. So when you look at a library, for example, any school library or a classroom library, or in the secondary panel, a department library, what we are looking to ask ourselves is, how inclusive are those libraries? Okay, and sort of the two ways into asking ourselves that many other school boards have already begun asking themselves are by author. So what range of author do we expose our students to in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion? Okay, in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, Indigenous, etc. So what types of authors do we have in the libraries? And what types of characters are portrayed in the books in the libraries? So some school boards who have already developed this guide, this classroom tool for teachers to ask themselves, what types of authors and characters am I showing, are saying, you know, if you have a character, do they only perpetuate a stereotype? And in some cases, a negative stereotype. So the flamboyant gay best friend, for example, or the Black child who is getting accused of something and sent to prison, who may or may not have done that thing. Okay, so the types of characters. So part of the action plan this year is to create a guide that will help our schools and our classroom teachers evaluate their own library resources that they're using. Their read alouds from kindergarten through grade 12, up to their core novels and texts in the English department. There are many boards who have already started the creation of those guides that we'll be using as some examples. And we'll be pulling together a committee of K-12 educators to take a look at what that's going to look like in our board. I can tell you what it will not look like. It will not look like a list of banned books and a list of approved books. That is not sustainable. And as Marjorie and I were chatting before this meeting began, there have been many, instances over history of people trying to ban books and take things off the shelves to not expose people to certain ideas, okay? So we will not as a district be doing banned books and approved books, but we will be creating a tool for classroom teachers as well as schools to evaluate their own libraries and see if we are exposing kids to an equitable, diverse, and inclusive range of both authors and characters, okay? And there are systemic pieces at play here. I won't sugarcoat that. The school system in and of itself, sadly and unfortunately, was created and founded on some systemically discriminatory practices. And I'll give you one example that falls into this text selection and school library review type of idea. So for example, very, very, very commonly, maybe when you were in high school, but even up until now, it would be very common for a secondary school student who is university bound in all 4 of their compulsory courses, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and 12, to read a core novel written by a white person that uses the N-word in a derogatory way. Grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. So that is not, in that example, that is not representative of equitable or inclusive or diverse authors or characters. Okay? De-streaming is something that I'm working on in partnership, primarily through Jenny. But it's important to note that whole movement was coming out of the equity secretariat at the ministry, right? For reasons, again, that are founded on discriminatory practices, i.e. marginalized populations of students, Black, Indigenous, and otherwise racialized, were being streamed into the applied level math course and therefore shutting off pathways at a much higher rate than non-Black or Indigenous or otherwise racialized students, okay? And as Ronald mentioned, I'll be working in conjunction with facilities and of course Tina and Judy and our newly hired Indigenous grad coach who starts with us on Monday. Her name is Logan Wright, to expand Indigenous cultural spaces throughout the district. Okay. Leadership, governance, and HR, 2 main bullets on this one for the action plan for this year. And again, I'll start at the bottom. I didn't order my bullets very well, but I'll start with that AP because it connects to the last one. So yes, in terms of school and classroom practices, we're trying to be more inclusive to the 2S LGBTQI+ community, but we need to reflect that in our policy as well, okay? And so AP 343, which is currently under review and hopefully moving into a revised draft very, very shortly, is not inclusive. It is not inclusive. It is not inclusive because as it sits, it's titled AP 343 transgender students. So it is not inclusive of other genders. It is only talking about people who identify as transgender. And it is not inclusive of staff or community members, okay? So the newly revised AP, which will soon move into a draft format, will be a gender identity and gender expression policy that applies to students, staff, and anybody coming into our buildings. All right, so that's an example of governance. And we'll be doing some other policy review and creation, actually required policy creation. For example, an anti-racism policy is required of school boards now over the course of the year. The other one, which I know you are aware of, and I'll speak to a little bit more specifically after this presentation as well, is some anti-oppression professional development that we're rolling out across the system. So you probably know because you were invited to one of the sessions, but we have Chris Souza, who's a human rights strategist, coming to visit the district in a couple of weeks, actually. And this represents the number of people who will be exposed to a half day of anti-oppression training, okay? Anti-oppression training is purposeful wording because what anti-oppression training does is it helps us to understand that at the foundation of some of our ideas, of some of our biases, of some of our practices, of some of the ways schools work, are systems of oppression. And systems of oppression are words that you will be familiar with: racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, right? So understanding how those systems are foundational in our work as educators and how we have to dismantle some of the learning that we were taught. We have to unlearn some of the learning in order to start to make some things better in our schools. But there's an example of who will be getting it, and Chris will be giving some specific sessions. So for example, Brent and his entire HR department will be getting anti-oppression training specifically directed towards all of the issues in human resources. Staffing, recruitment, retention, all of their hiring policies, all of that type of stuff, which will be similar to, but a little bit different than the teacher training that will be happening on the Friday. And you can see that we'll be taking, I think it's 3 secondary school English teachers from every secondary school and 1 or 2 elementary teachers from every school. Okay. And a lot of central staff. So really excited about that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him after this slide. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, awesome. Okay, I am going to get you to click on that, but not just yet. Okay. So data collection, reporting, and integration. I never would have thought I would be so excited about collecting data, but I'm kind of excited about it now. So last year, if you remember, we collected demographic data, so identity data on who we were as employees of the Renfrew County District School Board. And we're in the process of collating that data and publicizing it on the website. You can actually go on the website right now on the equity page, which I'll show you in a moment, and see the results of that, the system-wide results of that. So for example, what percentage of our system identifies as male, as female, etc. English speaking, French speaking, many different things. And okay, go ahead, John, you can pull that up for us. So this year, we are embarking on the collection of that data for our students. Okay. And also, I'm pretty excited about this webpage, which is new, that Mike Gaudin and Hannah and John helped create. But the student census project, John.
Yep.
So you're on the staff census. That's what I was just talking about. And I know it's hard to see, so just you can look at it later. But on the equity webpage, it outlines the entire implementation of collecting the data for our students from kindergarten to grade 12. Okay, we're doing it in 3 phases. Across our district. And the first phase starts soon, actually. It starts at the end of November. And we are collecting this data from students in grades 4 to grade 8. In the winter, after the turn of the second semester, we'll collect the data in the secondary schools. And then in the spring, we'll collect the data from about our students from kindergarten to grade 3 through their parents. Okay. So as has been going on across the province, we are following suit in terms of how we're collecting the data, the information that we give to the parents. We have a list of frequently asked questions there. For example, is this confidential? Is this anonymous? Why are you asking about my child's masculinity or femininity? Do we have to do this? All of the answers are up there on the website, and we're just beginning to roll that out in the schools now. In the 4 to 8 grades. Okay, so we are preparing the school administrators, the 4 to 8 classroom teachers. We're giving pre-lessons for grade relevant lesson plans, such as what is identity, what is race, what is ethnicity, and preparing them to be able to be there to assist the students who are in front of them. Okay, because it will be done in instructional time from grades 4 to grade 12 in our district. When we get to the spring, we'll be sending home the same collection tool through to the parents to answer the questions on behalf of their students. Also, just an interesting note, I was here earlier in the fall and talked about the climate survey results. And so we use a company called the Learning Bar for the climate survey, and it looks a certain way and the students get their login a certain way. And we're using the same company to collect the demographic data. So the students will be used to getting their password and logging in, and they'll be used to the format of what that survey actually looks like when they're asking the questions. And all of these questions, unlike the climate survey data, which is the intellectual property of the company, and we don't publicize on our website, all of these questions are public because the ministry is asking us to ask these questions of the students. And the Anti-Racism Act is asking the ministry to ask us to ask these questions of the students. So every question that the student will be filling out is already public right now. We'll be communicating that with 4 to 8 parents next Monday, won't we, John? Good. Now, just one little note on the integration piece. So that's an interesting piece, right? Which basically is, what do we do with this data once we collect it? And we won't be, you can see how I put, we're at phase 1 for the student census. We're at phase 2 for the staff census. We're starting to report. We'll be putting the reports out, as there already is one report out on the website of across our system, how we identify as employees. So phase 1 is collection. That's where we're at with students. Phase 2 is reporting. That's where we're at with staff. Phase 3 for both groups will be, what are we going to do about it? Integrating it. And some school boards are ahead of us on that. So they're asking themselves things like, we have 6% of students who identify as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and we have 1% of staff who identify as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So how can we attract, recruit, and retain more employees who identify as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, so that our staff is more accurately represented according to our student population. So that's the integration piece. We're not there yet with the data, but we'll get there. And last but not least, organizational culture change. And this is one that, again, across the province, these strategies that you see as part of our action plan this year are fairly similar across the province. And essentially, the strategies under organizational culture change, what's going to be a significant driver for us to change some of our practices across the district are by asking specific groups of students, staff, and community members. And those groups are groups who have been historically marginalized or underrepresented. Okay, so this year we will call together a group of students across the system who identify as Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQI+, otherwise marginalized, identify as having a disability, identify as living in poverty. And we will be asking them questions on how we are doing. And one specific ministry indicator that they're asking of us is, do all of your students see themselves in your schools, in your classrooms, in your curriculum, in your programs? Do they see themselves? And it's not a democracy. It's not a democracy. If 95% of our students are white and 95% of our students see themselves, but 5% don't, all our students don't see themselves represented. Okay? So we've already started on that. We've also already started on establishing a community leadership group of parents and other community members who have historically been marginalized in the school system as well. And it's interesting, some people, not just parents, but some parents now are starting to somehow know that there is a role like this in our board. And I sometimes get cold calls and say, hey, can I tell you about what my experience has been as a parent in this school? And it's a very good school. It's a wonderful school. The school might even think they have an exceptional relationship with their parent group. But this parent's story might be different than that because they've been historically marginalized or feel marginalized by the school system. So we want to gather some of that voice, and again, working with John and the communications team to develop some tools to ask questions of those groups of people to inform our next steps. And those are just some really ideas that are coming out right now from the student group that's kind of, it's forming in a grassroots way at this point. It's students who are coming to us and saying, and this is a real life example, I don't like hearing the N-word used in my school. I love my school. I love my staff. I love my school. But can you help me with this? And that student asked that that's their idea at the bottom. Can we put together a video or a public service announcement of some kind that talks about that? And Jaslyn and the student senate are on board with that student now too. And some of the student senators and equity ministers across the district are going to help contribute to that. Students saying, in their words, how they want to make the school system a little bit better from a point of view where they have been historically marginalized. All right. And it's fascinating because, as I'm sure you know, the N word, we know it's not a good word. We don't use it. But it's in all kinds of music, right? And it's in all kinds of art. But the students talking about that and how it impacts them when it's used in the school is very powerful. We've already started gathering some video evidence of that. And another student example, student voice piece is the idea of a rainbow student forum of some kind. We're not sure what that's going to look like, but again, it's on increasing the inclusivity of the 2S LGBTQI+ community. And essentially students want to get together who belong to gender and sexuality alliances in our schools. They want to get together and, celebrate their identity, learn what's happening in other schools, learn about beyond high school supports that they can find for themselves. Okay, so those are two examples. So that's essentially organizational culture change, is asking students, staff, we probably won't get to the staff this year, but that's on the plan for future years, students and parents or community members from historically marginalized populations to give us their feedback. Okay, and that's it. Questions or comments on the plan, the action plan, first action plan ever for equity?
Yeah, your leadership / governance slide. I was just pleased to see that there's also included OSSTF and ETFO, the large union groups.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a statement that's like, we are moving in this direction, period.
And those organizations are moving in this direction as well. In fact, Christian, our OSSTF president, and I have been talking a lot. He said, you know what? Our organization, the provincial OSSTF, needs to get better at this. And I need you to help me learn about how to get better at this so I can help OSSTF get better at this. That's a good partnership.
Just sends a message to the grassroots frontline people.
Yeah.
If they're directly involved in this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to chime in here. We need to give credit where credit is due. Like, teacher unions in Ontario have been very proactive at developing resources for their members and engaging in professional development. So it's not surprising that they are willing partners in this work. They have been all along. So I think we need to recognize this. We also need to recognize that we've been engaging in professional development around this for over 40 years. And at some point in time, as Patrick Case was mentioning in a virtual session last week, Patrick Case being the Assistant Deputy Minister, was clear that we need to see actions. And students and their families need to see that their lived experiences in our schools is going to be free of discrimination. So no longer is it acceptable to have this professional development. Perhaps it gives us a false sense of comfort that we've engaged in this development, but if the lived experience of students doesn't change, then we need to recalibrate. So it's very important to keep that in mind. But coming back to the federations, yeah, they've been doing this work alongside boards and alongside the ministry for many years as well. So I agree. It's great that our plan is very inclusive of them, but again, we shouldn't be surprised that they're willing to engage in this work. They have been for many years.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the best resources I find actually for, thinking and facilitating conversations in schools are out of the union groups. But I think it's nice that in this particular, like what's coming up with Chris coming, there's kind of a synergy of willingness, between the unions and the board to want to engage in anti-oppression training. which is very foundational. It's a little bit deeper than, say, going to training on how to diversify your library, which, as you saw, is still an important part of it. But yeah, so I agree. Anything else?
I guess just a comment too. It's a big plan, right? I mean,
It is a big plan.
it's a big job and thank you for your leadership on it. I think it'll be very interesting to see how it evolves over the next 4 to 5 years even. I guess one specific question I had, and you talked about the organizational culture change and establishing a student advisory group of students who've been historically marginalized. So I guess I'm wondering, so how do you go about doing that without having those students feeling like they're being pointed out, or it's just a bit of a challenge on how to do that, and maybe students are just willing to come forward.
It is a challenge. I'll tell you, it is a challenge. And that's why I said we're kind of starting grassroots. Some students are coming forward to me or their school administrator and saying, I want you to help me. Like the example of the student that I referenced. She came forward and said, I want you to help me. And I want this to be better. I love my school. I want it to be better in my school. And yes, I will work with students across the district to try to make things better. I don't think the N-word should be used as a joke.
I don't imagine that's the norm.
It's not the norm, but then, it's through relationships. So then I build the relationship with the student, and then I say, well, can I talk to the student trustee about that? And the student says yes. And then the student trustee says, I think we should make equity ministers. And so we do. And then the equity ministers are like, well, I want to talk about this. And, so right now it's grassroots. It will become a little bit more formalized, but it is hard. But essentially that's what we want. We want the students coming forward to say, I want to help make a difference. Things are good. And the students I've spoken to, they're not saying really anything bad. They're just saying, I want to help make it a bit better, a bit more equitable. We need to see more gender neutral bathrooms. Jaslyn's group and I were on a conversation about last time. And the student was saying, we don't want to, it's not a joke to talk about the N-word in an English class, for example. So right now it's kind of grassroots, and it's the same with the community and parent group, actually. They've been coming forward either to the school administration or to myself and said, hey, I'm not upset, but I think we need to get a little bit better in this way over here. And I think you can help me. Can you help me? But you're right. We don't want to say, oh, can every principal send, one Black student to go talk to Amy? No, that's not how we're.
It's all about communications.
Yes. And relationships.
And developing those relationships.
And safety. Safety. For sure. Anything else? Okay, I'll just, before I go, because I know there's one other little, about Chris Souza. So Chris Souza, he is a friend of mine, actually. He's become a friend of mine. He's been working in human rights and equity and inclusion in education for many years, 30 years, I think. I think Pino put out a little bit of a bio. So he has been a teacher. He's been a teacher in the elementary level and the secondary level. He was seconded by his board many years ago to do, an equity consulting job in his board. Then he was seconded by the ministry to write the equity action plan for the ministry, in part with a team. Then he's worked at the university level as well, and now he's working with school boards and other associations, lawyers, police services, probation and parole, across the country, really, in terms of understanding some of these very complex issues. And so it was his wondering if you could find time to peruse the article that I think is attached in there sometime before November 23rd. He said, if not, that's okay. But if so, when you meet him, and I'm sure you will enjoy working with him on November 23rd, he will probably ask, do we have a common understanding of the, I think there's only 5, there's sort of 5 nuggets out of that article that Paul Gorski calls equity detours that we don't want to take. So if you could do that for him, he would be happy. But I look forward for you to meeting him, and that's it, unless anyone has any comments or questions. Marjorie?
Thank you very much, Amy, for your explanations of all this. I think that people sort of sit here very thoughtful and not yet ready to ask questions. And I think the reason is that you're not just explaining to us your plan, you're also providing PD for the whole lot of us who all need the PD. And that's why we are in reflective mood and we're not quite ready yet to ask some questions, I think. So thank you very much for opening our minds every time that you come here. And we appreciate you taking the time because you're obviously very busy with a number of other projects.
My pleasure.
I'm only going to close by saying that if Chris does his job well with us in 2 weeks' time, we're going to feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
He's going to create some cognitive dissonance for us. If he doesn't, then he probably hasn't pushed hard enough on us. But having heard Chris before, and knowing the body of his work, I think Chris will push us out of our comfort zone. That is really important as we engage in this work. So I thank you for your support, and I would perhaps my last comment is going to be the work that we do is we're going to get some of it right, not all of it right, and hopefully when we don't get it right, and I'm saying this with every ounce of sincerity, our communities are going to push back on us when we don't get it right. And it'll be important that we've created the structures and the mindset that they feel comfortable saying, this was right, but this is wrong. And we will be there to listen and adjust. That's part of of our collection of information and data. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Anyone want to bring up any new business? No? Excellent, thank you. So I would like to move that we will recommend that the board accept this, the report when it is made to the board. Second, please. Thank you, Susan, and all in favor? Thank you. A motion to adjourn, please. Thanks, Mike and Leo. Thank you very much. The meeting is now adjourned. I believe that we will take a little break.
I think we'll take a little break. Let's do 15 minutes.
Sounds good.
So it's 3:32. We'll get back here about 4:02.
Something else. Go through another, but I just wondered if there was any.
Recorded, so if I had. So.
Send these to you. If you like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
That's another thought.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
Finance.
Pardon me?
So we're on the so we need to chat about yeah.
Okay, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Leo, Chair of Finance and Resort.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I now call the November 9th, 2021 Finance and Resources Committee to order. Everybody had a look at the agenda. Are there any amendments so far? Seeing none. I need a motion to approve the agenda. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mike. All in favor? That's passed. Are there any conflicts of interest with the stated agenda? Seeing none. So we'll proceed to our one and only item on the agenda, which is the Petrol FMU Schools Boundary Review Follow-Up Report. We had this mentioned a few weeks ago, saying that this anticipated report was coming in today. So I'll hand it over to Jennifer Burns to do this report.
Leo, I was gonna stand at the back beside Tammy, but then you'll all have to turn around me. Your neck is feeling like mine, that would be fun, so I'll just come up here. So nothing new. We've talked about the Petrol Family Schools in March, I believe, March 9th, and here we are on November 9th. We were here 2 weeks ago just to remind everybody sort of where we were at. So just a high-level background. Of course, the Petrol Family of Schools is made up of Valor, which is a JK 212. Offers both the English programming and the early French immersion. Pineview is a JK to 8, offering English with core French from J to JK to 8. And Herman, we have the English core with the early French immersion as well. Over the years, our students coming in are out overtaking the spaces that we have available there. And so we are feeling the accommodation pressures at Herman. So we've got more students coming in than we have spaces for, and our graduating cohorts are smaller than our incoming cohorts. And so we're going to, you'll see when you look at the charts, that line goes up. The ministry likes to concentrate on the on-the-ground capacity, otherwise known as the OTG, which they assign a numeric value to the number of classrooms, and they say that you've got this much space available. But as Renaud has, and both Bill and Renaud have referred to in the past, because of the way the school has evolved, spaces like staff room isn't really sufficient to support all of the staff members there. There is not a specific resource room, so one classroom is being used for that purposes, and then we have another space that's used to support the teacher outside the classroom work and a library. So when we consider what's available, we look at the number of spaces that are available for classroom use, and so that would be in addition to the OTG. Not something for this month's decision, but just something to keep in the back of your mind. 4 of those classrooms, well, one is a resource room, so 3 of those rooms being used as a classroom are made up of a porta pack, which is coming to the end of its useful life. So it's good for next year, the year after. We're anticipating in about 5 years, we're going to see, the roof, the infrastructure, and that sort of thing is just not going to be suitable for learning spaces anymore. And so those 4 spaces, 1 being resource and 3 classrooms, would no longer be available. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. We don't need to make a decision on that today. We do need to, whether the decision is today or in 2 weeks, we do need to have a decision on what programming and how it's offered in Petawawa, because we just have too many students for the spaces available in September of 2022. So just 2 different things. So when we were here in March, we offered several scenarios, and we were tasked with coming back with scenarios that had a focus on moving some older grades from Herman and perhaps Pineview to Valor, and then looking at what the impact of offering early French immersion programming at Pineview would do to offset those pressures. So we're going to do a little back and forth. So I'll describe the scenarios and Tammy will talk through. We don't have it up on the screen, but you've got the charts in front of you. So scenario one is keeping Herman, and Pine View the same and just simply moving grade 7 and 8s currently going to Herman over to Valor. So programming would remain the same. Pine View JK to 8. At Herman, it would be JK to 6, and those 7 and 8s would head off to Valor a little bit early. So Tammy will talk through those charts.
So when we go to Appendix 4, which is scenario 1, you can see that they fit in the buildings. I say buildings because I'm including portables and porta packs as they sit currently with the OTG. So that's what that graph shows us right now. So we've included the 3 portables, and the 4 classroom porta pack in these charts. Down below, we've done the calculations based on current class sizes to see how many classes are needed to support the program that would run. So you can see that in the first line, and then we just kind of said, what would we need to support to make that happen? So in this scenario, in 2022, for example, we need 18 classes. We have 12 in the permanent building, and we would need 6 temporary spaces. We currently have 7 at the site. So that's what this chart is showing. So we're showing that we'd go up to 19, in 2025 in this scenario.
Okay, and then so scenario 2 and 3 are similar in that the grade 7 and 8s move from Herman to Valor in both of the situations. And in both situations, we have early French immersion offered at Pineview. The difference being scenario 2, the easiest way to describe it is there would be no grandfathering. We would look to the students that are currently attending Herman, who have an attendance boundary address of Pineview, and we would take them from Herman and we would ask them to attend Pineview, and we would be able to accomplish that because we would be offering early French immersion to support all of those grades. And I'll stop there and let Tammy go through the charts, and then I'll describe scenario 3.
And so that's Appendix 5. As you can see, the enrollment is well below the OTG in each of those years. And the number of classrooms required starts off at 17 and grows to 18 instead of 19 in the previous scenario.
So that we've numerically, numbers that tell us that will work. So the difference from scenario 2 to scenario 3 is 7 and 8, of course, go to Valor. EFI is introduced at Pineview, but with a softer approach. And so students who are attendance boundary school to Pineview, but currently attending early French immersion at Highview could continue there. But anybody new wanting to, the early grades, it would be offered at the early grades at Pineview. So currently, if you're in attendance boundary Pineview, you would attend Herman if you wanted early French immersion, but because it's being offered at Pineview, that would no longer be an option. We would also throw it out to any kids who were in kindergarten, who were in the Pineview attendance boundary, who were attending Herman. If they would like to come back to their attendance boundary school, that would be an option too. So same outcome, early French immersion at Pineview and Herman, but a softer approach, if you will, going with scenario 3. And Tammy will talk that through.
Again, the OTG based on the current makes it look like it's going to work. When we look at the number of classes needed, it's tighter than the scenario 2. It's using up all the classes that we have in the buildings now. So it goes up to 19 because the enrollment keeps growing and not as many are being taken away as the hard approach.
Yeah. You may recall I have that chart embedded in my mind. I think Renaud showed it. It was the the 50 or so cohorts, coming in, and I think at 6, 7, and 8, it's around 30 going out. So we have these additional 20 students in each cohort year after year after year. So that's why it's a little tighter with the softer approach until that evens out. Marjorie, I know that you asked about enrollment projections heading out, and I think there is that is included in that was Appendix 3. We do tend to, I mean, we always have those numbers available to us. We do tend to only look within the 5 years because so much can change. But the numbers are there available for you.
Thank you.
And Susan, you asked about the Port Pack.
Mhm.
So, looking at the Porta Pack, Bill was kind enough to reach out, and we came up with, you can see all of the numbers there. Those are current year costs. We always know things, well, current year cost is different than 3 years out, 5 years out, but we're in, 18 months into a pandemic. We have supply chain issues. I'm just not comfortable putting an estimate beyond, what it would cost in 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. I can tell you, we're looking a little over $1.6 million. The portable itself, just over $1 million, but there's all of the, we've got to remove the old portable, install the new portable. We have to do the water hookups and the electrical hookups and everything else. And there's always change orders. So how do you pay for a Porta Pack? Because there's not the funding that would normally come, our capital funding, if we were doing a bricks and mortar addition, would come through the ministry. We have temporary accommodation funding, so that would be an option to us. We anticipate having about $500,000 in 5 years. Is that what we're going with?
At the end of this year, because we don't know from year to year.
If it continues. Yep. And proceeds of disposition, we have around 900. And then we would have to look to our internally restricted accumulated surplus accounts if for any to cover off any shortfall. So if we were to choose to go that route, that was how we would pull it off. And I guess the only other point I wanted to make is we're not doing a full pupil accommodation review process, of course, because that is the province has put a moratorium on that in 2018, 2017. They have come out with their new guideline. And when that moratorium is lifted, school boards will have to take a year to update their procedures to incorporate the new guideline elements before moving on into that process. We can go ahead with this because we fall into an exception because we are alleviating the pressures and we're only affecting less than 50% of the students in the school. We can go ahead. Community information sessions. So of course it's important. We're very familiar with this because we've been talking about it for 6 months, if not more. But to involve and inform our community partners, of course, that this would be coming down the pipes. And I know we initially were talking about January. We were wondering if we could move it up sooner just because of the impact on, I know I'm looking at John because kindergarten registration.
And staffing around.
Staffing. So just to allow parents to plan. So that's definitely, but we would need a decision before we could inform community partners. So I will open it up to questions or comments. And and Bill, manager of facilities, is here as well to help out.
Marjorie?
Thank you. Assuming we were to go with the Porta Pack purchase route, that's an awful lot of money and will exhaust some of our reserve accounts. And we don't know what the future holds. There's an election in the coming year. We don't know when we'll be allowed to do a PAR, which might enable us to do some more shifting of boundaries so that we would need to purchase something like the Porta Pack. So, and then we also don't know the population around Petawawa is obviously very flexible. And so I'm really concerned about putting that much money of our carefully hoarded little piggy banks into a purchase like this when all those other factors are so unclear.
Very valid point, which is why we're providing the information for you to keep that in the back of your mind. We're not at that decision-making point right now. It's just if we were to be, that's what it would look like. The portable, is in good shape. We look at it. It would be like having a trailer versus a house. A trailer won't last as long. It's different roof, it's different walls, a different floor, different substructure versus a brick home. So we're just long-term thinking. We need to know that, those 4 classrooms are not going to last as long as the rest of the brick structure. No decision is made at this point, and those are very valid points. If the moratorium is lifted and we could look at, undergoing the pupil accommodation process, we would be looking at the family schools in a different light.
Sorry, follow up, please.
Yes.
So what do you think would be the earliest time we need to really seriously consider the purchase of it? And then you,
We will be monitoring its condition every year. Of course, if you're going to anticipate installing one in 5 years out, then you need to be thinking about ordering it 3 years out, right? So, Bill, unless you have more to add, we'll be doing monitoring on an annual basis, and we would probably be looking for a decision in, 2 to 3 years.
so we could select a course which would have that as a probable line of action, without actually committing to it at this point, because then we might change course.
Right, so in 2 to 3 years, the daycare will also be up and running. If the option is to have early French immersion offered at Pineview, we would be able to see the how all of those fall out, and we would be back and looking again. That's why I would say 2, not 3 years. And so we would be looking at the enrollment, at the pressures and everything else, and saying, we've talked about this 2 or 3 years ago. This is where we are at now. Now we need to make a decision.
Would offering the, sorry, may I continue with the question? Would offering the French immersion at Pineview save us any money in transportation? I mean, it would build over the years, right? As that.
Yeah, the kids, it would probably be about the same. I know that the consortium already let me know that the buses are full, and we'll be needing to add an additional bus in that area just because of the number of students and where they live. So I couldn't say that it would be attributable exactly to the offering of French immersion at Pineview, because we're heading in that direction anyway.
Great, thanks. Marjorie and then Brian. I'm sorry, Susan and then.
That's okay. There's so many names here. It's hard to.
I know.
So I know we can't do a full accommodation review. Can we do a boundary review though?
Well, that is actually, like, if you were looking at where the boundaries are between
Yeah,
who
so-
goes to which school.
Yeah, so
That's where,
it could be it could be a second step, maybe. Is that kind of?
we did start there, and because Dawn, I think she's listening, is here on the screen. We did start there, and a lot has to do with where the neighborhoods are for Valor. They're landlocked. And then when we were looking to the other communities that already have houses, we would be shifting, but you would end up moving not a lot of students, not enough students, and they would be from JK to 8 to Valor. It really didn't provide an easy solution. I know that a lot of the new subdivisions that haven't been built yet would be zoned for Herman, and so we would certainly look at diverting them to Pineview or Valor.
So that might be a piece down the road to look at again, but it's something we could do, but it sounds like it's not going to help us enough.
Not enough.
Without doing something else as well.
That's right. Yeah, we did look at that at the beginning, and it just didn't offer enough relief.
So the difference, if I may, the difference between 2 and 3 then is there are some numbers different, like there are fewer students that would go to Pineview. At least we think at this point.
Well, because we would be starting with next year with just the introductory grades,
Right.
and then we would be grandfathering all of those with an attendance boundary of Pineview, currently attending early French immersion at Highview, or Herman, sorry, I keep saying that. We would be grandfathering them on, so we wouldn't be shifting those numbers back. And so over time, with the program offered at Pineview, the numbers would grow more slowly.
Unless we did a more French immersion, if we did a staggered,
And then we would actually have,
multi-program, a multi-grade French immersion.
yeah, and carve out, students currently attending Herman and saying, you'll have to go back to Pineview because it's your attendance. That's really only to offer the larger drop.
The third scenario certainly is a little softer, kinder, easier probably on parents, easier to sell to the general public than the
Yes.
second one, which is pretty hard and fast.
The second one make the numbers work really well.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the third one is more palatable.
Yes.
Okay, very much.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brian and then Pino.
Or that's the over.
Oh, yeah.
Already on.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a point to add to the conversation between scenarios 2 and 3, and we have done this before as an option for consideration, which is we did it most recently, Eganville and District Public School, a one-time multi-grade entry point for the startup at Pineview to bridge the gap between that softer approach that may take a little more time and that more forced approach where you're taking all the kids from kindergarten 6 and saying your school is now this. We could decide to do a kindergarten grade 1, 2, or a kindergarten 1, 2, 3, or a kindergarten grade 1 multi-grade entry to accelerate a bit of the start, move a few more kids along, and yet not force fit it entirely. So there is a small caveat that we can do that might, if advantageous. Now the wild card in that is that would be up to the parents deciding to actually do so. Right? It wouldn't be you're forced to do it. It's sort of, if you would like, because we've introduced a program at your community school, you may choose to do it, but it might give us more rounded numbers to fill classrooms. And I'll comment a little later on a couple of other items, but I did want to add that to the mix, that we could sort of enhance it a little bit if it's advantageous.
Thank you. Brian?
If we're going to do a boundary review, to me, that's step 2 in this process. We've got an immediate problem at Herman Street. It's quite a dramatic problem. And the growth area in Petrol, yes, Petrol is a growing area, but the growth area is Herman Street. It is on the other side of Dorn Street. There are major subdivisions going in there. The subdivisions that filled in the Valor area, they've already been established. And there's not all that much happening in the Pineview zone. If you were just going to rely on a boundary change between Pineview and in particular Herman Street, you'd be moving the boundary so far towards the former village, towards the Herman Street school, that I think you'd have a war going on with an awful lot of parents. You're going to send my kid all the way down there. The population center in Petrol is the former village. The township where Pineview is much more sparse in terms of their population density. A couple of considerations. One, you've got to do something with Herman Street. There is room, according to the ministry, at Valor. We also have to do something with Pineview. It's about roughly half of what the on the ground capacity is. And parents there are rightfully, nervous about the future of that school. We never get permission for an addition on the Herman Street when you got extra room at Pineview. Here's our opportunity to tell the community that yes, Pineview is here to stay, and it's going to be a viable school. It solves a lot of problems. The only other thing that I'm thinking of is that if we move students over to Valor, that solves to a certain extent the Herman Street problem. But then there's a whole building of Valor, and you've got a squashed secondary wing, and it's just going to have more students put pressure on that. But that's a fight for a different day. Right now, we've got to do something with Herman Street. We've got to have fewer kids in there. The only way we can do that really is grade 7 and 8 going over to Valor, and try to draw a few back to the Pineview zone. And to me, the way to do that is, number one, of course, we're not even considering anything else, but keep the 7s and 8s in Pineview and establish a viable French immersion program there. And if you're going to look at the 2 and 3, 1, basically you're going back, or number 3, grandfathering. Politically, you really have to grandfather. This has happened before. The boundary between Pineview and Herman Street was changed in the 70s, was changed in the 80s, and in both cases, the students were, families had their students grandfathered. The community would expect nothing less. Within a few years, you'll have the right number of students from the Pineview zone going to Pineview, alleviate pressure off of Herman Street, and then you can consider a more right-sized type of boundary review, and there you'd be going up on the east side of Petrol Boulevard towards the Valor zone, which part of that was locked off when Valor was created from Pineview. I like it. It works, it's sellable.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The only thing that I want to comment on is I can clearly remember Manager Bill Murray talking about porta packs presentation here quite recently. And what I really got to adjust to that was, you know, they're short term and potentially expensive, and there's a lot of other things that are involved. And I mean, with the supply chain issues we're having, we don't know in the foreseeable future how long it's gonna last. For me, quarter packs, although sometimes necessary, unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't think it's good long-term planning. That's where I'm coming from. I mean, I like your analogy between a trailer and a house. Just my thoughts. I just, it concerns me going down the road to actually even look at someday a new quarter pack. I mean, I don't know all the factors, but my initial instincts are, unless it's absolutely unavoidable, we try not to go down that road. Thank you.
One of the pieces, Trustee, and I think you raised some good points. One of the, as much as we'd love to think that, you know, our students all fit into the bricks and mortar perfectly, it never quite works out that way. One of the advantages of a porta pack, because we are suffering right now from the inability to make some moves due to excess space within bricks and mortars where we can't literally chop off the entire, demolish the wing of the school. So right now, one of the things that hinder us is empty space in places where we can't utilize it. One of the, because I think you raise a good point there, it's always ideal to be in bricks and mortar, but one of the nice things about the flexibility of the porta pack, even if a new one was put in, is if the Herman community matures in a quarter century, we could remove that porta pack, the next one, and not have it as a hindrance for a longer term piece. It's a flexible option that in the leadership in 2045 might say, okay, Herman's matured, we don't need that kind of space, out it goes after its shelf life is done, without it being left, especially if the community has matured, and then it's working against your overall numbers for the rest of the organization. So that there are some pros and cons, because there are a few buildings right now that I could only wish we'd had a porta pack that we could remove, increase the index to be able to make a different decision as an organization. So really appreciate the point. Not ideal overall, but there is an element of flex there, especially if it's a fluid community that may serve a leadership team far beyond any of us down the road that isn't a locked bricks and mortar kind of a decision that would then stay with us likely for twice the length of time. So I really appreciate the point, but I'm starting to realize there is something to the flex that can provide if way down the road there's a vast difference. But to your point, Trustee Gannett, if in 2050 our numbers are the same in that, the idea would have been to do the bricks and mortar. So there is that piece of the pie. So really valid points. I just wanted to add the other perspective of the flex that can do it.
Jocelyn and then Mike.
Yeah. I definitely understand like the portable classrooms as, you know, an alternative right now, but just kind of looking into the future. I know that the portable classrooms, they're great for this situation where we need a quick fix, but it's not a long-term fix, as it does affect the education of students. From what I've heard, just from student experiences, is they feel kind of disconnected from the school as they, you know, to even use the bathroom, they have to walk back to school. There's kind of issues with passes getting to the school because, of course, like the classrooms are locked at certain times. So there are issues when it comes to the student experience, but looking for a temporary solution, I think it is a solution for sure.
Mike and then Brian.
I just wanted to make comment, directly before, point well taken. I was looking 5 to 10 years down the road. You're looking 2025. And I don't know what the federal government, I don't know what the federal government's gonna do with the base, let alone. But anyway, just point well taken. Thank you.
We don't really like portables. We don't particularly like porta packs, but they're better than portables, and I've walked in them and You know, if you didn't really know, you really wouldn't suspect you're not really in the building. A little bit different, but it's still, it's comfortable and it's part of the larger building. The reality is, are we going to get any funding for bricks and mortar? And with Pineview half full, it's not gonna happen. So the best option then is the next one down and quarterback. That's just reality.
Any other discussion or questions?
So just recognizing the timing issue that we have, right? Because it sounds to me as if we need to forward, or at least let you know what we're thinking as the best approach. And I don't know what the consensus is around the table. I guess the only way we'll find out is if we put a motion on board. Do you want to put a motion forward since it's your area, Brian?
Thank you very much. I certainly would. I move that we adopt scenario 3, shifting Herman Street grade 7A to Bell Elementary, and we introduce the early French immersion at Pineview. I guess this would be effective September 2022.
Seconder for that? Thanks. Any more discussion on that? Yes, Margaret.
I'm not feeling ready to vote on this yet. Sorry. Okay. And I understand that if we were to delay it another 2 weeks, that would lead to a board meeting. Would there be a space in the board meeting where this could be discussed or voted on? It could be brought to the committee of the whole. Yeah, I don't want to sort of get my point of view because maybe I haven't done my homework enough with something.
It's a big step.
If we do vote now, I will abstain because I don't feel ready to vote yet. Sorry about that. No, don't be sorry.
In terms of timing for the administration, does that make any real difference or?
Through Ms. Shell, turned over to John, but I think we do have that time, but.
It'd be easier for now.
With respect to the preparations, or it's hard to say, given we don't know what, I mean, if we have a sense today, even if we don't have that motion, that there is a gravity towards one, I think we can proceed with early stage preparations according to what timelines we feel is appropriate. But to the other point around having the discussion at the board meeting, absolutely, COW, you can do that. And proceed that way.
And that would also allow some conversation with the 3 trustees who are now.
Yes, the 3 who are absent. Yeah.
So it's probably a wise decision, but at least have it on them, have the discussion, but also recognize we don't make the decision until. So we could table the motion. So we could table the motion. Yes. I don't want inconvenient staff either, because you put a lot of effort into preparing these reports for us, and I appreciate that. I think we do need a board motion, an acceptance of a board motion before we can inform the public.
Correct.
So at board, which wouldn't come until 2 weeks from now anyway, a decision now would allow us to go into preparation mode, which we can still get started on that. And I guess it's really around the timeline I'm looking at, John, because we have to, and it's communicating to folks. It's fine. Yeah. Because we would need that board, the decision at the board meeting in 2 weeks before we could formally go out to share the information with our community partners. So, and great point if you're not, and 3 members are missing and they've missed out on the conversation. So, and we did say, we came to you 2 weeks ago and gave you a sort of a 6-week timeline, and it's not something to be rushed. So certainly I would say the time is there.
So, Mr. Chair, could do as an option, it's sort of hearing things, you could have a motion to table the main motion, in which case it's preserved for the next meeting sitting in the board, which is the end of the month. That motion then is still there. It's still in front of you. Have the discussion and vote on it.
Thank you for that. I really do feel that I want to hear the opinions of the 3 members who are not here today. And, I think that an important decision like this one, very important to all the families in Petrol and staff and everybody else, really we need to hear voices of all our trustees, and it's unfortunate that we don't have them here today. So I would like to suggest in that case that if we do table the motion today, that perhaps the chair write to communicate with the other three trustees and let them know that this large decision is going to be made at the committee of the whole, and that other trustees have requested their input at that time. Whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, we really need to hear from them.
And we would certainly be here at next meeting, should there be any questions that come out of, you know, your wonderings or conversations that you've had over the next 2 weeks.
Would contact you in the meantime.
You could contact us in the meantime, or we would be here to
May
have
we
a
contact, for example, or? John?
Through myself,
Yeah.
through the director's office, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll make sure the minutes reflect the fact the motion was put on the floor, and in that way the trustees who weren't here understand that one of these options is being brought forward, and therefore they can consider the report in light of the discussion of things.
A final note, not to complicate things, but there is another tool in your toolbox. I mean, if you don't feel that you want to wait till the end of the month, there is always the special board meeting to discuss anything, and that's a discussion and a choice with the chair and the director of education. So just also an option.
If we, Mr. Chair, if we opted for that option, would that make it easier for the administration in preparing for the board meeting?
I think it gives us any more time is good. But I mean, I understand the reasons that have been stated around perhaps waiting till the end of the month as well. So we'll make it work. We can make it work. I'm confident in terms of the timelines that we've all discussed this afternoon, that we can still communicate and plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we couldn't have been making anything public before the board approval anyway, so I think we've got a sense of where it's heading. Nothing would have been shared out other than the behind the scenes planning, which we think we can manage based on the balance of today's discussion.
This is open. So it'll be posted. Yeah.
This discussion?
Yes.
This,
No, this is open. Yeah.
Just we don't have the formal board approval, which we need very much.
Need someone to table then, or a major or large?
Just in terms of operations in the school communities, it is important that we have a decision by board on the 23rd. I think with Jen and John, we can work at starting the plans for the community information sessions. We can start planning those, anticipating that we will have a final decision on the 23rd. Once we get beyond that, then it gets really tricky, because then we're going to miss out on some key dates with school registrations and configurations and shifting students, and then it gets really messy for our school. So anything we can do to facilitate the work at the school level on behalf of my schools, I'm going to say, will be appreciated, because we do need to be mindful of burden reduction. And even though there's work involved, there's a way of making this fairly seamless for schools in the implementation.
I'd like to move that we table the motion until November 23rd, on or before November the 23rd.
Seconder for that. So all in favor? All right, that's fast. So it's table. So at the committee meeting or at the board meeting? Meeting at the whole?
We'll decide whether it's.
Added that to the motion, sorry.
Well, next meeting, I mean, it could be the next meeting of the board, which could be committee or.
Well, it might be a
special.
special meeting, it might be November 23rd, on or before.
Yes, not.
My recommendation would be that, as practice, that it comes through COW and then to board. I believe that would be the most prudent.
Great. Any other discussion on that? Nothing. Any other items for Finance and Resources Committee? Seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn the finance. Thank you. And seconded by Brian. All in favor? Pass. Thank you all. Lively discussion.
Make a motion. Well, be the trustee.
Yeah. That's it. No, because this makes a motion for the employee to